Every year, it was the same. December the 25th came around, and the house would be filled with noise. Wrapping paper tearing, music playing, wine glasses clinking. They remembered everything. The turkey, the crackers, the dog's stocking even. But they never remembered me. I used to tell myself it didn't matter. That it was selfish to expect anyone to remember my birthday on Christmas Day. That they had so much else going on. That it was an honest mistake. But the truth is, it wasn't. Because they remembered each other. Every last one of them. Dad had his favorite chocolate waiting by his chair each Father's Day. Mum got breakfast in bed on her birthday. Luke, the golden child, had balloons and banners and speeches made. Even my youngest cousin got a handmade scrapbook for her 10th. Me? Nothing. No card, no cake, not even a casual, happy birthday Mia in passing. Just silence. Like I was a guest in their lives. An invisible footnote in the margins of their day. I remember one year. I must have been about 12. I baked my own cake. Chocolate sponge with cheap icing I bought from the corner shop using coins I'd saved. I decorated it with jelly beans and candles I found in the junk drawer. They walked right past it. Mum asked if I'd made it for Christmas dinner. I nodded. What else was I supposed to say? That was the moment something inside me changed. Stopped hoping. Stopped expecting. I learned not to cry about it. I learned to bury it deeper, where no one could touch it. But it didn't go away. Each year just stacked another layer of resentment on top of the last. I didn't just feel forgotten. I felt erased, like they'd pressed delete on me and carried on living, uninterrupted. Still, I stayed. I smiled in the family photos. I cooked when Mum was too tired, covered for Luke when he screwed up, listened to Dad's endless lectures about discipline and gratitude. I did everything right, and it never mattered. This year was supposed to be different. I told myself I'd say something. I rehearsed the words in the mirror. Today's my birthday too, remember? I even wrapped a little box for myself and left it under the tree, just to see if anyone would ask. No one did. And so that night, I packed my bag. No dramatic exit, no tears. Just a quiet goodbye in my head. I stood in the doorway and watched them laughing, their faces lit by the fire and fairy lights, completely unaware. I left my letters on the mantelpiece, one for each of them. No return address, no explanation, just the truth. I walked out into the cold, the streetlights flickering like they were saluting me. I didn't know exactly where I was going yet, but I knew this. They would remember me now. I can only imagine the look on their faces when they found them. Crisp white envelopes, each with a name written in my careful hand. No frills, no smiley faces, just cold black ink. I'd written them the night before, one by one, with a clarity I'd never had before. Writing them wasn't emotional. It was clinical. Like surgery, cutting out the rot. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I simply wrote what needed to be said. Mum's letter was the longest. Dear Mum, I began, even though I hated starting it that way. There was nothing dear about her anymore. I told her how her silence had been the loudest thing in the house, how her refusal to stand up for me had carved a hole I couldn't fill. I reminded her of all the times she saw me hurt and turned away, how she always chose peace over protection, her comfort over my dignity. You taught me how to survive, I wrote, but you never taught me I was worth loving. Dad's letter was shorter, sharper. To the man who taught me discipline, but never taught me softness. I reminded him how he praised Luke for his every mediocre achievement, but when I got top grades, he barely blinked. How he told me to stop being dramatic when I cried. How he'd call me sensitive like it was an insult. I told him I stopped looking for his approval the day he told me girls need to learn their place. Then came Luke, golden boy, favorite child, the one who could do no wrong. You treated me like a shadow, I wrote, there when you needed someone to blame, gone when it came time to celebrate. I reminded him of the time he stole money from Mum's purse, and I took the fall. How he ruined my birthday once with a prank that ended in tears, and no one ever told him off. I told him he wasn't a hero, just loud enough to drown me out. I didn't leave a letter for the cousins, the aunts, the extras. They never noticed me, so they didn't deserve to know where I'd gone. I sealed each one with a piece of tape and left them lined up like little bombs waiting to go off. And I knew they would. I could already hear the phone calls, the raised voices, the confused anger. Why would she write that? How could she think that way? She's always been a little dramatic. Good. Let them talk. Let them finally see me, even if it's through the mess I left behind. I wasn't running away. I was clearing space. Because this wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning. The start of something cold, calculated, precise. They forgot me every year, treated me like I didn't exist. Now they'd remember. Every day. In every quiet moment. When the house felt too still, too empty, too full of ghosts. They'd remember what it's like when a girl finally decides she's done being invisible. I walked out just before sunrise. The house was still sleeping, breathing heavily with holiday exhaustion. Ribbons and wrapping paper lay like discarded skin on the floor. Cold cups of tea, half-eaten mince pies. The usual mess of a family pretending to be close for one day a year. I didn't take much. Just a small rucksack with the essentials, a burner phone, my notebook, some clothes, a train ticket I bought weeks ago with cash. No goodbyes, no dramatic slamming of doors. Just the soft creak of the back door and the click of it shutting behind me. It felt clean. I walked fast. Not because I was in danger, but because I didn't want to give myself time to think. If I paused, I might get sentimental. And there was no space for that now, not in this new chapter. By the time they woke up, I was already gone. Somewhere between counties, somewhere gray and unfamiliar, the kind of place no one would look for me. I checked the group chat out of curiosity. Mom had sent a message. "Has anyone seen Mia this morning?" Luke replied a few minutes later. "She's probably sulking. Ignore her." Sulking. Even now, even after the letters. They still didn't get it. Good. That meant they wouldn't see what was coming. I checked into a tiny B&B run by an old woman who didn't ask questions. Cash in hand, no ID. Just a key and a room that smelled like lavender. And old paperbacks. I sat on the bed and pulled out my notebook. The real heart of the plan. Pages filled with dates, observations, overheard conversations, passwords, secrets, weaknesses. You see, over the years, while they were busy forgetting me, I was watching, taking note, building a map of their lives, thread by thread. Every argument, every dirty little habit, every lie they whispered when they thought no one was listening. I knew where the bodies were buried, because I'd buried a few of them myself. Emotionally, I mean. This wasn't about revenge for the sake of it. It wasn't a tantrum. It was justice. Years of being overlooked, stepped on, dismissed. They taught me how to disappear. Now I was going to show them what that silence had created. Step 1 was done. Vanish. Disrupt the normal. Send the letters. Let the house fill with panic. Step 2 would be more fun. They didn't know it yet, but I was already inside their world. A whisper in their inbox. A shadow in their routine. And soon, I'd become a storm. One they never saw coming. I wasn't coming back. Not until they'd unraveled completely. The texts started to pile up by midday. First Mum, then Emma, then Dad. Each one more confused than the last. They were skimming the surface of concern, but I could read between the lines. They were panicking. Good. Mum's first message was clumsy. "Mia, if you're upset about something, we can talk. Please just come home." I ignored it. Then came Emma. "Where the hell are you? Your letter was messed up." Messed up? That one made me laugh, because Emma's letter had only told the truth. How she used me as a punching bag every time her own life crumbled. How she dumped her kids on me when she needed a mental health break, and then took credit when I helped them thrive. How she gossiped about me behind my back, called me dramatic, selfish, weird. Messed up? No, just honest. Dad didn't message me until much later. A single line. "This isn't funny. Grow up." I stared at his words for a long time. Let them soak in. Even now he thought it was a joke. Or maybe he just didn't believe I had the guts to disappear. Maybe he thought I was Still that small girl sitting at the end of the table, watching him hand out gifts he never meant for me, smiling like nothing hurt. He didn't get it. Not yet. But he would. The best part? None of them knew where I'd gone, because they never paid enough attention to even guess. I could have vanished to Spain or Sheffield or the bottom of the bloody sea, and it would make no difference. They'd never looked closely enough to know where I might go if I ever needed to breathe. I flipped open my notebook again. The plan was laid out cleanly. Who, when, how. Every letter had been a trigger. Now came the dominoes. First would be Emma. I had her passwords. She reused them all the time. Pathetic. I logged into one of her old email accounts from a local cafe. Sat there sipping the world's worst cappuccino while I watched her digital life unfold. Photos, receipts, emails she thought were deleted. One in particular caught my eye. An old message to her ex-husband, the one she swore she never cheated on. Turns out she lied. There it was. Explicit, damning. The kind of thing that could crack a custody agreement in half. I saved it, tucked it away. I wasn't going to use it yet, but it felt good to hold a match near the fuse. Then I checked in on Luke's social media, still tagging himself at the same pub every Thursday, still posting gym selfies with barely disguised captions aimed at his ex. Still too easy. I smiled. This was going to be easier than I thought. Let the games begin. The first sign that the letters were working came 2 days later. Emma called me. She never calls me. Not for birthdays, not for holidays, not even when I ended up in hospital once after fainting from exhaustion. But now, her number flashed across my burner phone like a warning bell. I didn't answer. She tried again and again. Then texts started flowing in, fast and panicked. Mia, please, call me back. We need to talk. You're not serious about what you said in that letter, right? Where are you? I'll come get you. Just don't do anything stupid. I leaned back in the stiff hotel chair and watched the screen go dark. She was unraveling. Good. She'd always been so put together on the surface. Perfect hair, perfect house, perfect pitying glances at me. But the cracks were there. I just helped shine the light through them. And then there was Mum. I didn't expect her to break so fast, but she did. She posted one of those vague, guilt-soaked Facebook statuses. Sometimes you don't realize how much someone means to you until they're gone. If anyone sees Mia, tell her we love her. We just want her home. The comments were a mix of sympathy and confusion. Old family friends asking what happened, distant cousins pretending to care. But the funniest part? None of them ever remembered. My birthday either. Not once. Suddenly I was worth something. Now that I'd disappeared. Classic. I watched them all spin and flail while I lay low. My little rented flat in a town nobody remembered was quiet and clean. I slept late. Ate what I wanted. Wrote more plans. One afternoon, I even went for a walk in the cold winter sun. Just wandered aimlessly through the silent streets, breathing. In the silence. Nobody calling my name. Nobody expecting me to smile politely while they forgot me. It was peace. But it wouldn't last. Because the next move was bigger. Dad. He never responded to his letter, of course. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. My words to him had been the hardest to write, and the most necessary. I told him how he broke me without lifting a hand, how his indifference chipped away at me more than shouting ever could, how his absence sat louder in a room than his presence ever did. And now, he was pretending none of this had happened, pretending I was just acting out, being dramatic, being difficult. I wasn't. I was just getting started. The next letter, anonymous, typed, would be sent to his work, not with threats, with questions, just enough to stir doubt about the shady business trip, the missing invoice, the thing Mom always denied knowing about, but I'd seen with my own eyes. He'd feel it too, the cold breath of fear on the back of his neck. Let them all squirm. I was done being invisible. The hardest part of revenge isn't the planning, it's the waiting, the stillness between the moves, where your mind itches and doubts creep in like rot. What if they don't care? What if they read the letters and laughed, shook their heads, moved on with their self-absorbed lives? But then the cracks kept widening. Aunt Lorna messaged me out of nowhere, said she'd heard there was some drama going on and hoped I was okay. She dropped a thinly veiled reference to the letter I sent her daughter, my cousin Amy. Amy, who once locked me in a cupboard for 2 hours at Christmas and told everyone I'd run off to cry for attention. My letter to her had been short, just the truth. I never forgot that day. You did probably, but I didn't. Not when Mom laughed about it. Not when Dad told me to toughen up. Not when you smiled through it all. Amy hadn't replied, but she'd clearly been rattled enough to mention it to her mum. Good. Let them all look at each other with fresh eyes. Let the guilt chew on them for once. Meanwhile, Emma was spiraling. I saw on her Instagram, public of course, that she'd deleted half her pictures. No more smiling family shots, no Christmas table spreads, just a blurry photo of a wine glass and the caption, "Some things break and don't come back." I smiled. She always loved playing the victim. Now she finally had a stage for it. I hadn't meant to enjoy it this much, but there's something satisfying, dangerously satisfying, about watching people feel even a fraction of what they made you feel for years. I wasn't proud, but I wasn't sorry either. I started drafting the second wave of letters. These wouldn't be confessions. They'd be consequences. I had files, screenshots, receipts, years of texts and emails, moments they thought I didn't notice or had forgotten. But I noticed everything. I remembered. Mum's secret savings account, for instance. The one she hid from Dad during the divorce scare 5 years ago. I'd found it when I was bored one summer, poking around on her old laptop while she was at work. Or Emma's little incident at uni, the one she paid someone to keep quiet. I found out purely by accident, years later, through a mutual acquaintance who had no idea she was talking to Emma's sister. And Dad, well, I knew about more than just the business trip. I wasn't going to drop it all at once. No, this wasn't about destruction. It was about control, about power, about flipping the script. For once, I wasn't the forgotten one. I was the one pulling the strings. It was terrifying how good it felt. And yet, a part of me, a small, annoying, almost drowned out part, still wondered, would any of this make them see me? Really see me? But even if they didn't, they'd never forget me again. That was enough for now. The first real crack appeared in the form of a voicemail. Emma. Her voice was strained, barely hiding the panic beneath the edge of her polished tone. "Mia, I don't know what you're playing at, but you need to stop. You've made your point. You've hurt people. Congratulations. But this is getting out of hand." I replayed it 3 times. I wasn't sure if I wanted to laugh or scream. Hurt people? That was rich coming from her. This was the same sister who once made me cry on my 16th birthday because she forgot I was allergic to strawberries and insisted on baking a cake smothered in them anyway. She said I was being dramatic. Everyone agreed. Now, the dramatics were mine to wield. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. I just waited. 2 days later, the next move came from Dad. Not directly, of course not. He'd never been direct with me a day in his life. But he sent an email. Cold, clinical, like a boss writing to a misbehaving intern. "Mia, your recent behavior is concerning. The letters were in poor taste and have caused unnecessary upset to the family. I'd like you to consider the damage you're doing not just to others, but to yourself. Regards, Dad." No love. No hope you're okay. Just regards. Classic. What he didn't realize was that he'd just confirmed something important. I was finally being noticed. They could ignore me for birthdays, for Christmases, for family gatherings, but not now. Now, I was loud in their lives. I was unavoidable, but not everyone was reacting the same way. Mum didn't say a word. Not one call, not one message. Radio silence. And somehow, that stung the most. She was always the quiet one, the peacekeeper, the one who'd say nothing when things got tense, but would fold the washing tighter than necessary. She hurt with silence. I wondered what my letter had done to her. I pictured her reading it in the kitchen, tea going cold, hands trembling, not with rage, but recognition. Because Hers was the longest letter I wrote. You let it happen. You watched them forget me year after year, and you never once stood up. You never once said, Mia matters too. You taught me how to be invisible, and now you're surprised I disappeared. Still, she said nothing. I told myself that was fine, that it meant the words had hit her. Maybe they lodged so deep in her chest she couldn't breathe through them, or maybe she just didn't care. Either way, I kept moving. By now, I had planned out every letter in the second wave. Each one a carefully sharpened knife made of truths they thought were buried, and each would be delivered in perfect time. The goal wasn't chaos, it was clarity. It was finally making them feel the weight of their choices. The birthdays missed, the laughter I wasn't invited to, the smiles I had to pretend didn't hurt. I was just getting started. A week had passed since I'd disappeared. The silence between us had settled into something uncomfortable. But I wasn't the one they were worried about. Not yet. They were too busy trying to smooth things over, patch up the damage they thought they could ignore. I watched them, from my corner, from the distance I had made for myself, and I knew they were already crumbling. It was Emma again. She texted me this time. The message was short, clipped, and betrayed her panic even through the screen. Mia, please, this isn't you. Come home. Whatever's going on, we can fix it. We can sort it out. Just stop. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. What she didn't understand was that I wasn't running away from them. I wasn't lost or broken like they like to think. I was finally being seen, even if it was in the worst possible light. I wasn't looking for them to fix anything. I wasn't looking for apologies. I just wanted them to feel the weight of their neglect, the weight of their indifference. I was going to make them realize how little they really knew me, how little they'd cared. It was only a few hours later when I got a second message, this time from Dad. Mia, I don't understand why you're doing this. We're family. You've always had a place with us, but this is going too far. I won't let you destroy everything. Destroy everything? I laughed out loud. It was the first time I had done so in days. The absurdity of it hit me. They hadn't thought of me as family for years. Not since I was little. Not since I started asking for attention, for validation, for love that they couldn't even pretend to give. I wasn't going to destroy anything. I was going to expose the lie they had been living. But it was the third message that hit hardest. It was from Mum, the first time she had reached out. Mia, please. I know I'm not the best mother, but I'm your mother. You're my daughter. I love you. Please talk to me. Come back home. Let's fix this. Together. I stared at the words, over and over, unable to look away. Love. She said she loved me. But where had that love been when I was ignored for every birthday? Where had it been when I was left to cry alone in my room because no one remembered I existed until it was convenient for them? Where was her love when I asked for it? This wasn't love. It was guilt. It was desperation. I wasn't falling for it. Not this time. I had written a letter to her, too. It was the most brutal of them all. I had to remind her of everything she had failed to do. All the quiet moments when she let the neglect happen. All the times when I looked at her and asked her to see me, and she chose to look away. I didn't send it yet, but I would. Just not yet. The real game was about to begin. I could feel it in my bones. They were all so desperate, trying to put the pieces back together, trying to make things right, but they couldn't. Not now. They had forgotten me for so long that they would never remember me the way I was meant to be remembered, but I would remind them, piece by piece. I'd break them all down until they saw who I was, who I had always been. And by then, they wouldn't have a choice but to look. I had given them time to sit with their guilt, time to wrestle with their emotions, to realize they were losing control. But I knew better. Guilt was a fleeting thing. It faded. What they needed wasn't remorse. It was consequence. So, I started sending the letters. The ones I had written carefully, the ones that tore apart their carefully constructed facades. Emma was the first to get hers. Emma, You were always the perfect daughter, weren't you? Always so polished, always so poised. But underneath all of that, you were just a puppet for Mom and Dad, weren't you? You let them dictate your life, control your every move. I watched you. You never stood up for me. I was invisible to you. You never cared enough to see who I really was. You just followed the script. And when I needed you most, when I asked for help, you turned your back. Now you're scrambling to fix things. Too little, too late. I had made sure it was harsh. I had made sure it dug deep. But Emma's message was different. She was always so sure of herself, but this time, she couldn't hide behind her perfect image. She responded quickly as expected. You don't get it, Mia. I didn't have a choice. You think I didn't care? But I was stuck. I was expected to do everything they asked, just like you were. Don't put this all on me. I'm not the villain here. I laughed, but I didn't respond. She couldn't see it. She never would. It wasn't about the blame game anymore. It was about the truth. Next, I sent the letter to Dad. Dad, you always thought you could hide behind your authority, your head of the family title. But you never actually led. You never listened. You always shut me down, put me in my place, like I was nothing. You're a coward, Dad. You've spent your life pretending you're the strong one, but you're just as weak as the rest of them. I wasn't the problem. You were. And now that you've lost control, you're pretending to be concerned. It's too late for that. His response came much later, just as I expected. He tried to guilt trip me, tried to use logic to justify his actions. But there was no logic when it came to neglect. No words could fix the broken parts of me that he'd ignored all these years. Mia, I've given you everything. Everything. I could. I don't know what else you want from me, but this isn't you. This isn't how you were raised. You're just angry, and I get that. But you'll regret this. Regret. That word again. I knew he would say that. They always did. I wasn't angry. I was done. Done with them pretending they had the power to fix what they had already destroyed. Lastly, I sent the hardest letter, the one to Mum. Mum, you've always been the one to pretend. You've always put on the act of being the loving, kind mother. But you were never there. Never. You let Dad walk all over me. You let me be invisible because it was easier. You never once fought for me. You never once showed up when I needed you. All those years, all those times I cried out for you and you just kept your distance. You never cared. Don't pretend you do now. I sent it late at night, hoping she wouldn't get a chance to reply before morning. She would wake up, read those words, and feel the weight of them. I wanted her to feel what I had felt for so long. The emptiness, the abandonment, the cold. The phone buzzed again, but this time, there was no message. They were all waiting now, waiting for me to break. But I wasn't breaking. I was building something much stronger. The letters were only the beginning. The days after the letters were sent passed with an unsettling calm. The house was eerily quiet, each of us locked in our own corners of the world. But for the first time in years, I felt a sense of control. It wasn't just about the letters, it was about what would come next. The silence was a precursor, a warning, that they were all beginning to feel the weight of their own guilt. Emma was the first to call me. Her voice was shaky, a mix of anger and desperation. Mia, you can't do this. You can't just disappear and expect us to fall in line. What do you want from us? I could hear her trying to keep it together, but I knew she was struggling. She wasn't the confident, perfect daughter anymore. She was someone who had been exposed. I let the phone ring for a few seconds before I responded, keeping my tone calm, controlled. I want nothing from you, Emma. Nothing. You've had everything you could ever want. You've been the golden child, the perfect one. And where was I, huh? Invisible. Nothing. She stammered for a response, but I didn't wait for her to find the words. There was no point. I already knew what she would say. I already knew how she'd try to manipulate the situation, twist things to make herself out to be the victim. I wasn't interested in that anymore. Goodbye, Emma, I said, hanging up before she could protest. The phone didn't ring again, not for a while, and I didn't expect it to. The next few days were filled with sporadic, fragmented messages. A missed call from Dad, a text from Mom asking if I was okay, but nothing significant. No heartfelt apologies, no admission of guilt, no realization of the damage they had done. I began to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. It wasn't the type of peace that came from forgiveness, because I wasn't ready for that yet. It was the peace that came from knowing that I had control, that I wasn't begging for their approval anymore. I spent my time in isolation, not because I was lonely, but because I needed to prepare for what was coming next. I needed to watch them, study their reactions, and make sure I wasn't missing anything. I had made sure their secrets had been exposed. The cracks in their perfect facades were already starting to show. But I was just getting started. I wanted them to suffer, not just for the neglect, but for the years of silence, the years of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. I needed them to know what it felt like to be invisible, to be ignored, to be forgotten. And that, my dear family, was just the beginning. They had no idea what was coming next. The days blurred together after I'd sent the letters. Time felt irrelevant, like I was floating in a space between past and future. The world outside didn't seem to care that I was gone, and that gave me a strange satisfaction. But my family? They were scrambling, each in their own way, trying to pick up the pieces of the mess I'd left behind. Mom was the hardest to ignore. I could feel her guilt from miles away, even though she never called or texted me again. It wasn't like her. She wasn't the type to sit in silence for long, but that's exactly what she did. Days passed without a word from her, as if the absence of communication was enough to show me that she was thinking about things. But I knew her better than that. I knew the way her mind worked. She would try to compartmentalize it, pretend it didn't matter, but I could feel it in her every action. The subtle way she avoided looking at the photos of me on the mantelpiece, the way she threw herself into her church activities, as though that might absolve her. I knew she was pretending, and I wasn't fooled. I had never been fooled. As for Dad, he didn't have the nerve to face me, not after what I'd written. He just sat in his study, ignoring the piles of unopened letters that now covered his desk, my final words to him. I'd shredded his image in that letter, dissected every cold, careless action he'd taken toward me. He was used to being the patriarch, the king of his little castle, but now he wasn't even sure what he was anymore. Emma didn't know how to handle it. She tried to contact me again, only this time it wasn't with anger. No, this time she sounded desperate. Mia, please, we need to talk. You can't just leave like this. It's tearing everyone apart. It's not just about the birthday anymore. We're family. I miss you. I stared at her message for a long time before responding. Her words didn't move me. I was used to the way she twisted things, how she'd always been able to play the victim. The second she thought she was losing control, she played her emotional card. But it was too late for that. You miss me? I replied coldly. You never even knew me, Emma. Not really. She texted back quickly, trying again to guilt me into coming home, but I deleted it before reading any more. For a moment, I felt a flicker of something. Anger, regret? No, it was a feeling I hadn't had in years. It was the satisfaction of knowing they were finally being forced to face the truth of who they had been, who they still were. Their perfect little lives, their pretense of togetherness were beginning to unravel. I had become the storm that they never saw coming, the storm that would tear them apart, piece by piece. And the best part? They still didn't know what I was truly capable of. They had no idea what I was planning, but they would. Soon enough. As the days passed, the silence stretched between us like an invisible wall. My family still hadn't come to terms with what had happened. In fact, it seemed like they were all trying to pretend that it wasn't happening at all. But I could see it. Those subtle shifts in their routines, the small cracks in their facades. They were unraveling, whether they realized it or not. Mum, of course, was pretending to be fine. She'd always been good at that, always kept up appearances. The dinners with the neighbors, the little chats over the garden fence, the gossip that would fill the empty space where real connection should have been. She kept all of it going like a well-rehearsed play. But every now and then, I'd hear her voice catch when she thought no one was listening. It wasn't much, just a fleeting moment. But it was enough to make me realize how badly she was taking this. Dad, though, he was different. His pride was too strong to let him feel anything other than contempt for me. The messages I had left, him, the accusations, the truth I had laid bare for him to see were like a wound in his side that he couldn't stop poking at. I knew he wasn't just angry with me, he was furious at the idea that his perfect, controlled life had been shaken by someone he could no longer control. And the worst part? He couldn't fix it. Not this time. Emma was a mess. That much was obvious from the constant text messages that filled my inbox. Pleas, apologies, desperate attempts at pulling me back into the fold. She couldn't understand why I had gone so far, why I had torn everything down when I could have just let it go, moved on with my life. But I knew. She was so wrapped up in her own version of the truth, she couldn't see how toxic our family really was. She couldn't see that I'd been invisible for years, my needs and desires buried beneath everyone else's. She couldn't see that every apology, every tear she shed was just another manipulation. They were all manipulations. And I was done, being the pawn. I could feel their eyes on me now, even if they weren't physically present. The guilt, the frustration, the regret, it was all there, simmering beneath the surface. But what they didn't realize was that I had already won. I had done something none of them ever thought possible. I had taken back my power, and they wouldn't even know what hit them until it was too late. I was done playing by their rules, the rules that said I was supposed to be quiet, to shrink, to keep my head down. No, I wasn't going to let them control my story anymore. My absence was my message, and every day that passed, it grew louder. My family was starting to realize the gravity of what they'd lost, but they still didn't know the full extent of my plan. They didn't know what I had in store for them. But they would, one by one. I had left them all letters. Cold, brutal letters that I had poured every ounce of my resentment into. They were carefully crafted, each one designed to pierce their defenses, to leave them raw and exposed. I knew they wouldn't be able to ignore them, not this time. Not when everything I had said was too true to deny. I started with Dad's letter. I'd written it on the night I left after packing everything I could carry. I had to say everything I'd kept buried for so long. All the things I'd never dared speak aloud. It wasn't just about the neglect, the way he had always treated me like a lesser version of the perfect son he had imagined. It wasn't just about the cold silences at the dinner table or the hours I'd spent waiting for his approval, hoping for the smallest ounce of validation. No, it was about the years he had spent pretending I wasn't even there, the way he had erased me from his life, as if I were a mistake he could just forget. And I let him know that. I told him how it felt to grow up in the shadow of a man who never cared to look at you, let alone love you. I told him how I had spent so many years waiting for him to see me, only to realize that I had been invisible in his eyes the whole time. And I ended it with one final line. I'm not your daughter. I'm not your project. I'm the one who's free now. Next, I wrote to Emma. I had always been the one to protect her, to stand in front of her whenever our parents' indifference got too sharp. I had been her shield, the one who kept the truth from her, who let her live in her bubble of denial. But not anymore. I was done being the protector. I was done living for others. I told her that I had carried her burden for far too long, that her blindness to the way our family functioned had been my prison. I reminded her of all the times she had sat idly by while our parents dismissed me, all the times she had taken the easy route, the comfortable route, and ignored my pain. I reminded her of the empty promises she had made, the things she had promised to fix but never followed through on. And I ended her letter with the harshest truth of all. You'll never be as strong as you think you are, not without facing the truth of what's been broken. And then there was Mum, the woman who had always smiled through the cracks, who had never once stepped in when I was pushed aside. I wrote her a letter too, though hers was the hardest to write. I had spent my whole life wanting her to be the one to save me, to be the one to notice that I was disappearing, but she never did. She was too caught up in her own survival, too wrapped in the web of keeping up appearances to see that I was falling apart. I told her I wasn't angry anymore. That's what she would want to hear. I told her I understood why she never fought. For me, why she always chose Dad over me. But that didn't mean I had to forgive her. I wrote to her about how I had learned to survive without her, how I no longer needed her, because I had learned that the only person I could count on was me. I ended her letter with a cold line. You weren't the mother I needed, but I've survived without you. And now, I'm done. Each letter was a tiny act of rebellion. Each one was a message, a slow burn that would set fire to the lives they thought they could keep intact. They hadn't realized how fragile their perfect little world really was. But I was about to show them. One piece at a time. It didn't take long for the letters to be found. I had planned it meticulously, leaving them in places where they would be impossible to miss. The kitchen counter, the living room table, Dad's study. I knew they would open them one by one, and when they did, it would be like pulling a thread on an unraveling sweater. The pieces would start falling apart. The first call came the very same evening. Dad. I could hear the panic in his voice, the way his words stumbled over each other, as if trying to maintain some semblance of control. But it was all too obvious. He was shaken. It was exactly what I wanted. Mia, we need to talk, he said. You can't just disappear like this. And these letters, I cut him off. You have no right to say anything to me, not after what you did. I'm not the one who abandoned this family, remember? I just decided to stop being the one who picks up the pieces after you and Mum destroy everything. He didn't respond immediately, as if he wasn't sure how to react to the unfamiliar version of me that had come out of hiding, the one who no longer feared his disapproval. I waited for him to collect his thoughts, but I wasn't going to make this easy. Why now, Mia? His voice dropped, quieter. After all these years, why leave like this? What do you want from us? I let out a sharp laugh, the bitterness of it echoing through the line. I want you to see me, Dad. I want you to feel every ounce of pain I've carried because of you, but you won't. You can't. And that's what makes this so sweet. You never even knew I existed until now, did you? There was silence on the other end, and then, just before I hung up, I added, You're right about one thing, though. I won't forget you. Not now. Not ever. I could feel the weight of the phone call lifting off my shoulders as I dropped it back into my bag. The first move had been made. I had planted the seed of doubt, the first crack in their perfect world, and now it was only a matter of time before it grew into something uncontainable. That night, I watched the messages flood in. Emma, Dad, Mum. Each one trying to understand why I'd done it. Each one scrambling to regain control. But I knew it was too late. The damage was done. By morning, the chaos had already started to ripple through the family. Emma had reached out, asking if we could talk. I didn't respond. Let her stew. Let her feel the weight of what she'd ignored all these years. She was the next in line. I had bigger things to focus on now. I wasn't just going to leave them with words. The plan was much more elaborate than that. Much more calculated. I had already begun putting the pieces into motion. What they didn't know was that this time, they weren't just going to forget me. This time, I was the one who would be unforgettable. The days that followed my disappearance were filled with frantic calls and desperate messages. They thought they could reach me, thought they could fix things with words. But words had never been enough before, and they certainly wouldn't be enough now. Emma's text came first. It was simple, like she was still trying to find the sister she once knew. Mia, I don't understand. What's happening? Why this? Why now? I left it unanswered. Emma never did understand. She never had the patience to listen when I needed her most. As the youngest, she was the one everyone protected. And it's not that I envied her that, but I resented the way she could float through life without ever being held accountable for anything. Dad's message followed, less personal, more concerned. His words felt like he was trying to pretend everything was fine, like he could undo what had been done with a few simple sentences. Mia, please, this is a mistake. You're upset, and I understand that. But running away won't solve anything. I felt no need to reply. What could I say? That I had been waiting for them to notice? That I had been invisible all these years? And now that I'd left, they were suddenly concerned. The hypocrisy stung. Mom didn't reach out. She never did. She had retreated into her quiet, emotionless shell, just as I knew she would. I could hear her silence in the space between the words everyone else spoke. She had always been the type to remain still, to bury her feelings beneath layers of indifference. And I knew that if she ever did speak, it would be to blame me for everything that had gone wrong. She was good at that. Blaming. The house was starting to feel colder, the silence more oppressive. As I moved further away from them, physically and emotionally, it became clear that my absence was creating a crack they couldn't ignore. I had become the phantom of the family, a shadow that loomed over them despite being unseen. It was exactly what I wanted. The letters I had left behind were only the beginning, the first layer of the plan. I had carefully designed each letter to hit where it would hurt the most. Each one was like a scalpel slicing open old wounds, and now the real work was beginning. I had already set things in motion. The slow burn of their unraveling was just getting started. Each letter had planted a seed, and now I was waiting for it to grow. Emma, as expected, had begun her search for me. She didn't know where to begin, but I knew her well enough to predict what. She'd try. She'd go to the places I once loved, the places I found solace in, away from the chaos of that house. She'd knock on doors and ask questions, trying to make sense of the mess I had left behind. But what she didn't know was that I had planned every single step of her investigation. The places she would go, the people she'd talk to. It was all part of my game. I wasn't going to make this easy for any of them. This time, the game had changed. I would not be forgotten. And as I sat in the quiet of my new life, watching their lives slowly start to fall apart, I smiled, because the best part was yet to come. Days passed, and I watched from a distance as the cracks in the family's facade started to widen. The messages, the calls, they'd never stop coming, and it only made it clearer to me how little they truly understood the depth of my pain. I was no longer just a daughter, a sister. I was a force they couldn't control, a shadow they couldn't outrun. Emma was the first to crack under the pressure. I knew she would be. She had always been so fragile, so eager to please, so desperate for approval. And now that I was gone, she was left to bear the weight of a family that was falling apart without me to hold it together. I had planned it carefully, watching her begin to spiral. She'd been sending me texts, trying to figure out what had gone wrong, why I'd disappeared. She'd left me a voicemail that sounded like she was choking on her words. "Mia, please, you can't just leave like this. I need you. I don't know what to do without you." It was the desperation in her voice that struck me, but it was also the way she twisted the truth, the way she still tried to make everything about her. As if I had left because of her, as if I had simply abandoned her when, in reality, she had never even noticed my pain. That night, I heard from Dad. His voice was calm, measured, the way it always was when he was trying to control the situation. "Mia, we need to talk. This isn't healthy. You've got to come home. Your mother's worried, and your sister—" I cut him off before he could finish. The guilt, the manipulation, it was also predictable. I didn't need him to tell me how I was supposed to feel. I didn't need him to act like he was concerned. His concern had always come too late. Instead of replying, I wrote my own letter. A final one. It was the most cutting of them all. I was done being the person they could ignore until it was convenient. I was done being the invisible one. "Dad, I see through you. You've always been the one who told me to stay quiet, to keep my head down, to never ask for more. You've trained me to believe that love is something I had to earn. But now I see it for what it is. It's control. You've been controlling us all along, and I won't be a part of it anymore." I left the letter on my bed, knowing they'd find it soon enough. But it wasn't just for them. It was for me too. A way to release all the resentment, all the anger that had built up over the years. When they found it, I knew they'd panic. I knew they'd try to fix things, to convince me to come back, to sweep everything under the rug. But there was no sweeping this away. The damage had already been done, and the seeds I'd planted had begun to grow. Emma called again the next morning. This time there was no pretense. Her voice was cracking, breaking. "Mia, you can't do this. You can't just disappear and not tell anyone where you are. We need you. Please, don't do this." I wasn't going to reply. Not to that. She didn't need me. She needed someone to fix the broken parts of her life. But I wasn't the one. Who could do that anymore? I had to let go, just as she had let go of me all those years ago. And so, I waited. Because I knew that the storm I had started was only just beginning. It didn't take long for things to unravel completely. Once the guilt started to eat away at them, there was no stopping it. Emma had been the first to break, but now it was Dad's turn. His calls came more frequently, his attempts at reconciliation more desperate. He sent letters, texts, even emails, each one getting progressively more frantic, as if he thought he could will me back into existence by sheer force of will. But nothing could pull me back. My mother, surprisingly, had been silent for the most part. But that silence wasn't peace. It was a kind of tension that I could feel from miles away. She wasn't the same person anymore. I saw glimpses of it when I still checked in, when I watched her from a distance. The way she went about her days with that stiff posture, that rigid smile, pretending nothing was wrong. I knew better. She was pretending, just as much as they all were. It was Emma, though, who came closest to finding me. Her voice, shaking and desperate, broke through the barriers I had set up. The letters, the calls, the voicemails, all soaked in a desperation I knew too well. She didn't care about the truth anymore. She just wanted me back. That's what they all wanted. They didn't care what I had to say or what I'd been through. They just wanted me to fit into their perfect little family again. But there was no going back. That's what they couldn't understand. I let her stew in her own misery for a few more days, just to let her feel the weight of it. I watched, waited, and timed my move carefully. I wrote one final letter to Emma. Short, to the point. It would be the last thing she'd hear from me for a long time. "You always needed me, didn't you? You never understood that I needed you too. But you couldn't see me. Not the real me. You couldn't hear my pain, Emma. All you ever saw was a person who could be there to patch things up for you. And now you're just like Dad, blaming everyone but yourself. You'll never understand what you've done. But I'm done trying to explain. Goodbye." It was the hardest thing I'd ever written, but it was also the only thing left to say. They couldn't fix this. None of them could. And I wasn't going to let them think that they could. As I sealed the envelope, I couldn't help but feel a certain sense of satisfaction. The last thread that connected us was about to snap, and once it did, they would understand. They would finally see what I had been trying to tell them all along. I wasn't just angry anymore. I wasn't just trying to hurt them or get back at them. No, this was something bigger. This was the reckoning they had been avoiding, and it was finally here. I had become something they couldn't ignore, something they couldn't pretend didn't exist. The final piece was about to fall into place. The game was almost over. I knew it was coming, even before I saw the look in their eyes, the weight of everything that had happened, all the lies, the guilt, the silences. They were finally starting to crack under the pressure. It wasn't just the letters anymore. It wasn't just the absence. It was something deeper, something they couldn't escape. I watched them unravel, piece by piece, as they tried to keep their lives together, but the cracks in the facade were too wide now. Emma had called one last time. Her voice was hoarse, almost broken, but I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say to her, nothing left to fix. Dad's attempt at an apology came too late. He tried to make everything right, sending me money, offering trips, promises of family time, but I wasn't buying any of it. He had already shown me who he was, the man who thought he could buy love, who thought his apologies could erase the years of neglect. His words meant nothing now. The damage had been done long ago. And then there was Mum. She'd been quiet, almost too quiet. She hadn't reached out in months, not since that final cold goodbye. I had expected her to be the first to crack, the first to beg for forgiveness, but she didn't. In a way, her silence was more damning than any of their actions. She knew. She knew exactly what she had allowed to happen, and she knew it wasn't just my absence that hurt. It was hers too, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. I had already won. I had gotten what I wanted, what I needed. The house was the final act, the place they thought would always be their sanctuary, the one thing they thought they could hold on to. But it was just a house, just walls, floors, memories that meant nothing now. I stood outside, the cold winter air biting at my skin, and I felt nothing. Not triumph, not joy, not even bitterness, just a sense of finality. It was over. I knew they were watching from the windows, waiting for me to make my next move. But I was done playing. The letters had served their purpose. The silence was now my victory. The house, the family, all of it. Nothing could bring it back. Nothing could undo what had been done. As I turned to leave, I let one last message echo in my mind. It wasn't for them. It was for me. This time, I won't be forgotten. I'll leave behind a legacy you can never erase. You'll remember me always. And with that, I walked away. Not for good, but for now. What I had set in motion would continue long after I was gone, slowly breaking them piece by piece, and they would never know what hit them. The game was over, but the consequences, they were just beginning.